What's that? I told him, I said, make sure you can ride with Mary.
Okay,
We're going to stand up.
Yes. There you go. Rick is supposed to be part
He's
of
not
it.
coming.
I know, he can't come. I was about to say that.
I'm sorry.
And if you did the lights in the front, you'd be able to see what was on there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that rendering is very exciting.
Did
you get on? It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm on, but I'm trying to get to
Yeah.
the, I'm trying to get
I
to
can't.
Roger's presentation. He sent it
It's
to
not
me.
on there.
He sent it to me in a PDF, and I can't.
It's better though.
Whoops.
Looks good.
I'll just watch it here. Are we on?
Good to go.
We set?
We're good to go.
We set?
Yep.
Okay, then I'll call the meeting to order. Would everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Sarah, I guess you're going to be our guinea pig. Sure. This is our first public hearing for the proposed school budget. Cool. So I guess I'd like to start out by saying that 5 years ago, when we went through the strategic planning process, the message that we received loud and clear from community members was that we needed to make students a priority. We needed to provide for them first and foremost, provide the programs and the materials and the activities that they needed to be successful for the future. But we needed to do that within the constraints of the tax cap. So the budget that we're presenting tonight is really our effort to do just that. You know, it keeps all existing programs, it enhances, provides for a few enhancements, and it comes within the tax cap. So, moving on, what will you be voting on May 15th? You'll be voting on a school district budget of $19,292,671 with a tax levy of $15,590,253. And that would be represented with a tax rate of $7.16 per $1,000 of assessed value, which would increase taxes on a $200,000 house by $40.64 with the present assessments. So that's one thing that everybody will be voting on. The second one is leases for Thank you. One 66 passenger bus and one 30 passenger bus, and then 3 Board of Education seats.
So, in terms of more details on the budget, we want to talk a little bit about the revenue. Where does the money come from? And our district, because of the property values within our school district, must rely heavily on property taxes. So what you can see in the pie chart is, over 80% of all of our revenue comes from property taxes. And that's very different than other districts. It's all based on state aid formulas, and so that's the bulk of it. However, we still rely a little over 15% on state and federal aid, and then you'll also see in our revenue sources, and all of this is in great detail in the booklet, use of the fund balance and some other revenue sources. So, the answer is, of course, the short answer is, of course, we rely heavily on property taxes. And so that's why it's a 15 plus out of 19. In terms of our expenditure areas, and this is really what Mary was talking about in her introduction, we prioritize the program areas. And so in this particular budget, what you'll see is that 75%, a little over 75% of all of our expenditures are going towards programs, and that's student programs, everything from classes to extracurricular activities, transportation, things that are necessary to educate kids. In addition, the capital component, and that's the maintenance of our facilities, a little over 14%, And then our administrative component is the smallest component, and that's just a little bit over 10%. So, you know, what's the short answer here? It's educational programs account for 3/4 of our expenses. And that's something we aim for, and that's something I think we're proud of. So in terms of increases, and so this little bar chart here reflects increases from this current budget year to the next budget year. And what you'll see here is this line represents the overall increase. It's 3.04%, and that includes property taxes, state aid, etc. And what this bar chart represents is our priorities. So in other words, we did increase in the administrative area, we did increase in the capital area, but what you can see is that the increases here were below, the percentage of the increase was lower than the overall increase, both in capital and administrative. It's in the program area that we place our priorities. So, you know, when you see enhancements or additions, like Mary said, we are talking about enhancements, additions, for the most part, to those program areas. And then just some basic facts that this budget is built on. And again, this is all a part of how the state calculates everything from what we can ask for to what we do receive. So this budget is built on a CPIU of 2.13%, and if you remember the property tax formula that has been with us since about 2011, the law now says that we must build our property tax cap on the CPIU. However, it's the CPIU or 2%, whichever is lower. And so this budget and the tax up the property tax cap is based on 2%, even though the CPIU is a little bit higher. So if this CPIU is 2.13%, we build it on this. If it's 4%, we build it on this. Okay, so this is where it is this year. And that's where we get our tax cap of 2.96%, and that's based on the state calculation that Leonard has walked the board through now for a number of months, and me too. In terms of other areas, our BOCES costs are projected to increase by 4.3%. That's an area that we have very little control over. Our health insurance premiums are increasing by 2%, and that's lower than we would expect and lower than average, and that's a good thing for building this budget. That really helped us build this budget. We also know that a big portion of our budget has to do with retirement costs and TRS, the Teacher Retirement System. We will be paying 10.63% of salaries next year, which is a little higher than what we're paying this year, 9.8%. Any questions about the facts? And then some highlights for this budget. So again, we've been working on this budget since January, so I know a lot of members of the board are very aware of all these bullets here. So what does this budget do? It adds one full-time librarian so that we have one librarian per school, and that is an addition or an enhancement. It replaces 2 aging pickup trucks. It adds a 30-passenger bus so that we can be more efficient in our transportation system with kids and their needs. It provides some additional support for the testing program at the high school level, where kids and families are often required to pay for the cost of those exams, so the AP and SAT exams. And then, again, in order to make this budget balanced, we also have to make some reductions, and we did that too in certain areas like conferences, extra duty, and technology costs.
So another question that we get asked often is, why do we need to provide, maintain our small classes? Why do we need to provide the extracurricular activities that we provide? Why do we need to provide a well-resourced library? And then the answer to that, there's more to it, but one of the basic answer is that schooling has changed. In the not too distant past, The focus was on lecture, on drilling, on memorization, on taking notes. That's changed, and if we want our children to be able to analyze, to be able to problem solve, to be able to collaborate, to be able to apply their knowledge, then we also need to provide the resources that they need in order to be able to accomplish those things. So next, you heard Roger say that we were adding a librarian so that we will have 2 full-time librarians, 1 in each school. So then the question is, why is that a focus? And there's, I think this quote really sums it up, but there are a lot of studies that support the importance of having a very active library system. One says where library media centers are better funded, academic achievement is higher, whether rich or poor, and whether adults in the community are well or poorly educated. Another study says the library can, to at least some extent, mitigate the effects of low socioeconomic status. The study also says teacher-librarian collaboration affects student achievement for the positive. And they came to the conclusion that there's a positive correlation between student achievement levels on various types of standardized measures and well-resourced library media services, including 1 or more full-time qualified librarians. So this was really why we placed a priority on adding a librarian. Second reason that we're proposing this budget is that student needs have increased. This chart, I think, really is powerful. I think that the dramatic increase in the percentage of students eligible for free and reduced lunches has surprised a lot of us. And if you can see from 2008, it was around 14%. Now it's over 42%. So this trend continues to climb, making success in schools far more challenging. And one of our most pressing goals over the past few years has been to find ways to shrink that opportunity gap. Underprivileged children have the same dreams that all children have for a happy and successful life, but they rarely have the same opportunities and often face additional barriers to reaching that goal. Small class sizes, access to extracurricular activities, and access to well-resourced school facilities like libraries, technology, science labs can make a real difference in reducing this opportunity gap.
And in addition to those very powerful reasons for why we're prioritizing our programs and why we're placing students first, the bottom line is that schools make a difference. They make a difference to kids' lives and the future. And sometimes it's hard to measure and correlate that, right? So and it's sometimes hard to attach standardized exams to that. But we know it because we see it, right? And here are just some examples. We hear it from kids. We hear it from kids upon their return. We hear it from people years later. The story of this gentleman, Ron Bercume, was a very powerful piece a few years ago when Tim Follis completed his biography of Ron. Ron was a student here who graduated, I think it was in '89, and had a very tough upbringing, but thanks to the power of certain programs, computers, the arts, he was able to really do something with his life that he didn't really expect to. He went to college, he went to the Rochester Institute of Technology, he became an artist but also a designer, and he became very successful and was able to articulate that back to the school later and to really share some of those stories, the kinds of things that make a difference, the kinds of things that are hard to grasp, but we know are powerful for kids. And while we hear about it from somebody like Ron or somebody like Tim, who was a graduate in the class of 2000, we know it happens every day. And so we think that if you want a strong community, if you want a strong Wilmington, if you want a strong Lake Placid, you need to have a strong Lake Placid Central School District, and you need to have a school district that really pays attention to kids and does the kinds of things for them that will make a difference now, but also into the future.
And we have a lot of reasons to be proud of our students. This chart shows academic success. You know, it's a history of student success. We have high graduation rates. We have high SAT and ACT scores. Many times they are above state and national averages. Last year's graduating class had region scores that met or exceeded the state average in all areas. In the 2017 graduates last year, 69% of them graduated with the Regents with honors. Another 6% graduated with Regents with honors with advanced designation. So even with the barriers that many of our students face, they still graduate prepared to be successful at the next level, whether that's college, whether that's in a chosen career path, or whether that's in military service.
And we just think we have lots more reasons to be proud of, and that's our prioritization of students first and foremost. That's our extracurricular programs where we have so many of our students participating. That's our music and arts programs, our mentoring, our leadership programs, our K-12 foreign language instruction. Our kids are fortunate that we're able to offer these kinds of things, that our community is willing to offer these kinds of programs for them. We meet a wide range of student needs, and that's at all ends, and that includes our special education programs, that includes our advanced placement programs, that includes our career and technical ed programs, where we have a lot of students heading over to our BOCES Center to study different areas, automotive and cosmetology and construction areas, etc. We have been developing more and more every year an interdisciplinary curriculum, and that means joining often English and social studies and other subjects as well, bringing the arts together with the academic programs within the classroom. So we are attempting to do this so that we can really help engage kids, interest kids, and motivate kids to grab hold of something that they're really excited about and to run with it. Other programs, we have our universal pre-K program where all of our students, all of our 4-year-olds can attend pre-K for free, and our new philanthropic fund that finds different ways and different routes to support kids, especially to try and bridge that opportunity gap that Mary's talking about.
This is you.
Oh, this is me? Yeah, this one's me. So we just thought maybe to shine a light on some of those different programs. You might want a quick slideshow. Those are all the photos we could squeeze into one rendition of Sweet Georgia Brown. Yeah, sometimes we hear feedback from people and they say, you know, school hasn't changed in 100 years. And I just invite you to take a look at this. Part of what we try to accomplish at this budget hearing is to answer questions that people have, but also anticipate questions that people have. And this is one that I know that I am regularly asked and others are regularly asked. And the question isn't our enrollment declining? And if our enrollment's declining, why are you adding teachers or why aren't you cutting teachers? And the answer, I think, is one we've been trying to follow now for the last 4 or 5 years, which is that really a true statement? And the answer is, well, no, that we have had an enrollment decline over the past 10 years. However, the decline in our faculty has been even greater. So we have reduced our faculty by 12% since 2008, and our enrollment during that time has declined by 10%. So our faculty numbers have declined greater. That decline has been greater than our enrollment decline. So yeah, it's true that we are adding one faculty member in this budget, and so that will get this closer to being even. But it is not true that we're adding more teachers than we are losing students when you look at the past 10 years.
So that brings us to the non-budget decisions that community members are going to need to make. One is there are 3 vacancies on the Board of Education. We have 3 board candidates, Alan Locke, Martha Spear, and Brian Liam Kennelly. Most of us that were around when he was in school know him as Liam. So we have 3 people running for 3 positions. 2 of those positions are for 2-year terms. One is for a 1-year term to complete an unexpired term of a board member who's resigned. The person who comes in third, gets the third fewest votes, will be sworn in immediately to fill that vacancy and will serve until next May, when they can either run for election for a 3-year term or leave the board. So that's the Board of Education vacancies and the candidates. The final piece that we will ask voters is for them to complete an exit poll. We do value the feedback that we get. We do like to understand where we are and what concerns the community members may have. So we are also going to invite voters to complete an exit poll. And then finally, voting day is Tuesday, May 15th. Vote both at the Wilmington Community Center or the Lake Placid Elementary School from 2 to 9. Absentee ballots are available at the district office. You can contact either Karen Angelopoulos or Tracy Ridenour. And then I guess we're here to answer any questions that you might have on either what we said or what's in the booklet. So
Thank
leave it
you.
up to you. You're
Very
welcome.
much. That's a wonderful presentation. I appreciate that.
Any questions from anybody? All right.
All right,
Well,
good.
thanks.
Thank you. And Sarah, thank you for continuing to come.
Oh, I appreciate that you all come down here, and sometimes we have more members of the public viewing it live, but it's also now available
We
through
have our
YouTube. So
live stream audience tonight. So.
yeah.
So we'll move back to the agenda, and we'll move up to, I forgot about the consent agenda. So if we go back to the consent agenda, we have 3 items on it: the minutes, the additional spring coach, and special education approvals. Does anybody want any of those items removed for further discussion? If not, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thanks, Colleen. Is there a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Are we going to just the old-fashioned voting?
It's up to you.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Oh, it's here, never mind, let's vote.
I know, it's like,
Yeah.
Everybody voted
Yes,
yes.
if you want.
I am.
Everybody voted yes, okay, the motion carries 5-4-0 against. Thank you. For the good of the cause? Anything more to say? Okay, then we'll go on to reports. We have the policy committee report. Patty?
We had the April policy meeting, and we went over the policy 2160, that there had been confusion in section 8, and we added language, and that's in front of the board tonight for first read, with the new additional language to try to help clarify between the school district board members and the board members on a charitable organization. And we're hoping that that helps. There were other policies we went over that were recommended by NISBA to look at, and the graduate, there's one that's required, so we did that, and it's a unique one in that it is a graduation ceremony required policy, and then this is the one that the regulation also is required to be approved by the board. And the regulations aren't normally approved by the board, but this one has a special thing. So the regulation was also done, so you'll see that for tonight for the first read. And so it's normally not something we do, and it was specific to their requirements. There were a couple other proposed policies with the graduation that were discussed and are not being used for the district. Whenever we're not required to use a policy, we try not to. And then the student expression policies, one is that we included it for people to review because the school-sponsored student expression and student personal expression were so closely linked that we included both of them for review, but there were no changes needed on the school-sponsored one. There were no changes recommended to it, but we did include it just so people could see the difference, and that was it. We have another policy meeting in June to get it in before the annual.
Great, thank you.
And we'll move on to policy first reads. As Patty pointed out, there are several that we are reviewing tonight. Roger, do you want to take us through them?
Some of this is going to be a review of what Patty just said. We have the graduation ceremony policy, and you can see from the changes that we are, this was one that was recommended by NISBA, required by the state this year. In fact, it was required to be passed earlier in the year, so we're a little bit late, but we are getting to it now. The reason for the requirement is because the state wants to be sure that every school district is allowing students who complete their education with a CDOS, that's the Career Development and Occupational Studies commencement credential, are allowed to walk and participate in their graduation ceremony. Now, in our school, students have always been allowed to do that. However, this is certainly an effort statewide to make sure that all students statewide are able to do that. So this policy that we're recommending is based on that requirement and really essentially recommends or requires that CDOS students are able to walk in their graduation ceremony. And then, as Patty mentioned, the graduation ceremony regulation, we again relied here on NISBA recommendations. we did what we usually do in our policy committee meetings, which is reduce the language. We did our best. There's still some in there, but it essentially just outlines in brief the process for participation in graduation ceremonies. Anything you want to add to that, policy committee members? So moving on to the 2160 School District Officer and Employee Code of Ethics. Patty's already really reviewed what we did there. We addressed the Section 8 that we've talked about at the board a few times, and we clarified some language in really two areas. One is we tried to make sure that there's no confusion between which board the policy is talking about, the board of the charitable organization versus the school board, this board. So we added, when needed, LPCSD board to clarify which board that was. And then we also added the language, recusal is not required when the LPCSD board member, officer, employee acts in an advisory or voluntary capacity to the charitable organization. Again, to fill in that gap in the language. Anything else to add to that one? To the next one, which is the two that, again, Patty just described briefly. This is the school-sponsored student expression and and then the student personal expression. Again, this is about freedom of expression in school. One, and when school is involved in organizing this the event, and one when individual students bring their desire to express their views to school. So a little bit different, one policy for each. The school-sponsored student expression, we had long discussions about that because really it's very relevant, very much relating to the most recent issues that schools are concerned with and that students have been protesting in our school. We did have a school-sponsored student walkout. We decided not to change any of the language in this proposed policy. We really believe that the language that's here is good. In terms of the student personal expression, again, this is when students choose to state their views publicly. This policy being altered just a bit represents where the school district stands on supporting or monitoring or organizing when and where those kinds of things can happen. Probably the biggest statement here is has to do with when schools are within their rights to restrict and limit student expression, and that's really when there's a substantial disruption in the school's educational environment. But other than that, this policy articulates and outlines how the school district supports students' right to express themselves within the school day. Anything you want to add to that? I believe that's all of them.
So the mission statement policy is not here. Is there a reason for that?
They're just reviewing them.
Just reviewing
Yes, for,
Did we review the mission statement?
no, that's what this is for, instead of doing it at the reorg meeting. She's having a couple of them done ahead of time, right?
Yeah, we've never needed, that hasn't come up as a problem, but we have to say we've looked at it every year.
Okay.
So this is a way for us to say we've looked at it and we can check that box, and then there's one less policy on July.
Great. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about any of those?
And if anyone ever wants to do anything with the mission statement, they're welcome. We just haven't had it come up. It seems to keep covering within what we're doing.
Very good. Then we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Thank you.
So for my superintendent's report, I have a few things. And first, is some recognition, school board recognition. So it is my pleasure to recognize some of the accomplishments of members of our school board. So first, I have an award here for, it's a Board Achievement Award, which is to Joan Hallett Valentine for participation in the NISPA Leadership Development Training totaling 75 points. Joan, congratulations. Next, Board Achievement Award for totaling 75 points in leadership development training. This one is for Dan Marvin. Congratulations, Dan. We also have a Board Achievement Award for Jeff Brownell. Congratulations, Jeff.
Yes.
We have this Board Excellence Award is for participation in New York State School Board Association leadership development opportunities totaling 150 points. But this is for Patricia Gallagher.
Yay!
150 points. Now, I'm not sure why NISPA attached a check for this one, but let's see. This is called Board Mastery Award, and this person is not here, but thankfully we are online, and so we can be very proud to award this to Richard Preston for participation in NISPA Leadership Development Opportunities totaling 250 points. Congratulations to Rick, who unfortunately couldn't make it to the meeting tonight.
It's not a check, it's a certificate.
It is a certificate.
It's disappointing.
Hold us one
This is one so Rick has earned one in-person training. So
Yeah.
is that free training?
Yes.
Wow, all right.
Massage or something.
No.
So congratulations to everybody. It really does. You invest so much time and energy. You don't have to attend the trainings, but you do it because you get something out of it. It contributes to what you are able to do for the school board. So thank you very much. Just a few other things I want to mention from my superintendent's report. One is, just very briefly, I want you to know that we've begun discussions with Saranac Lake Central School District to continue our SLP sort of project. And you might remember that our girls hockey team last year was converted into what we call the SLP hockey team, a combined, a true shared team between the two districts for girls hockey, its own name and its own uniforms, etc. We are looking at a possible expansion to lacrosse and boys hockey, and so we are discussing the pros and cons and how this kind of direction might benefit kids. Just wanted to let you know those conversations are going on. And then finally, I just want to mention what's coming up in terms of school events and activities. So today we began the second half of the annual state exams for grades 3 through 8. Today was the first day of 2 days of math testing. So you might remember that the shift from 3 days per exam to 2 days was one of the changes implemented by the New York State Education Department. There were some other changes implemented too. And that was in response to some of the widely expressed concerns about the exams that families had shared. So we are seeing more participation this year, and so that's in progress right now. Tomorrow will be the second day, and that's again grades 3 through 8. Other upcoming events, our Friends meet tomorrow night. That's the elementary school's Friends Committee. And I especially want to thank them for their support for what's coming up. Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up, and that's next week. And Friends does a lot to recognize the importance of teachers, and they treat them like kings. So it's really nice.
Me too, it's great fun.
I have 2 events to mention for Friday. The first is a kindergarten field trip to the Lake Placid Police Department. This would be in honor of the letter P. And I understand that it's also possible they may make some other stops. Oh no, I've forgotten where else they might stop. I'm going to think about that one. But they have some other possible stops. The post, thank you very much. The post office was one. Okay. But, so the letter P is coming up for kindergarten. And then also on Friday, this is true, this actually goes into Saturday, is the NISMA Solo Ensemble Festival. So this is an opportunity for our musicians to choose a challenging piece of music, practice it, and then perform it in a setting where they're being judged by a neutral judge, not by somebody that they know, but by somebody, usually a music teacher, trained musician from elsewhere. So it's a really nice chance for our kids to really gauge how they're doing, to push themselves a little bit, and then to see where it can take them. In fact, this is also one of the ways that kids qualify to participate in the area all-state concerts that go on in the fall, and then all counties to some extent later on in the year. So best of luck to our student musicians. They'll be traveling to Beekman Town, some of them one student at a time, because it's really spread out throughout the weekend. And then at the end of next week, Saturday, May 12th, there's a lot of things really going on in the middle of May. I'll highlight these. The after-school program hosts its annual Touch a Truck fundraiser. Lake Placid Village has its annual cleanup day. The Builders Club, this is the middle school version of Key Club, will be taking the plunge into the lake, which, as far as I can tell, is still forbidden.
It's I understand Mr. Brinkley's going to come.
Is that he's going to too? Okay, you didn't see that. That supports the Tri-Lakes Humane Society and the Ecumenical Food Pantries that supports them as well, and Lake Placid's backpack program. And then, of course, athletic contests are actually now in full swing, and it's sort of a day-by-day basis. Yesterday wasn't a great day, but today there were some contests going on. It is a weather-shortened season, but they're going to try and squeeze in as much as they can, so best of luck to our spring athletes. And that's everything I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you. So information for the board, there's a couple things there. One is a tenure notification letter, and then a letter to the E.M. Cooper Library. Are there any questions on that?
No, there we go.
Then we move on to linking goals with agenda items. The budget presentation was one. And then I think this school nurse proclamation would go with education. Does anybody have any others?
Just acknowledging the board members that received.
Yes, that would be leaders. That's in leadership. That actually is one of our objectives. So that's a good point. The board awards.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, then we can move on to action items. The minutes, we did the consent agenda. So that brings us to personnel, and the one personnel item we have is the National School Nurse Day proclamation.
Mary, that's in additional action items.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Personnel.
That's right, but we've already.
Yeah.
Okay,
Personnel
we approved the additional spring coach by consent. So we go to additional action items. Thank you. National School Nurse Proclamation. The proposed proclamation reads, whereas students are the future, and by investing in them today, we are ensuring our world for tomorrow. And whereas families deserve to feel confident that their children will be cared for when they are at school. And whereas all students have a right to have their physical and mental health needs safely met while in the school setting, and whereas students today face more complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas school nurses have served a critical role in improving public health and ensuring students' academic success for more than 100 years, and whereas school nurses address the home and community factors, e.g. social determinants, that impact students' health, and whereas school nurses are professional nurses that advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievements of all students by serving on the front lines and providing a critical safety net for our nation's most fragile children, and whereas school nurses act as a liaison to the school community, families, and healthcare providers on behalf of children's health by promoting wellness and improving health outcomes for our nation's children, and whereas school nurses support the health and educational success of children and youth by providing access to care when children's cognitive development is at its peak, and whereas school nurses are members of school-based teams like school health services, 504, IEP, disaster emergency planning to address the school population, and whereas school nurses understand the link between health and learning, are in a position to make a positive difference for children every day, therefore, be it resolved that the National Association of School Nurses celebrates and acknowledges the accomplishments of school nurses everywhere in their efforts of meeting the needs of today's students by improving the delivery of health care to our schools, and offers gratitude for the nation's school nurses who contribute to our local communities by helping students stay healthy in school and ready to learn, and keeping parents and guardians at work, not just on this National School Nurse Day, but at every opportunity throughout the year. Now therefore, the Lake Placid Central School Board of Education does hereby proclaim Wednesday, May 9th, 2018 as School Nurse Day and commend its observance to all citizens. Is there a motion to approve this proclamation?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Patty. Is there discussion? If not, please vote. And the motion carries 5-4-0 against. The special education was approved with the consent agenda. Are there any questions concerning the packet that's for the consideration of the May 8th meeting?
No.
Okay. Okay. Then we move on to the executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing the annual evaluation of the superintendent?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you.
I just mark everybody.
Yes. Motion carries 5-4-0 against, and it is 7:22. Do that pretty quickly. Tomorrow.